Kia ora koutou, ko tō Marsh tōku ingoa he kairahi ako ahau I te ware mai tauranga at Te Kure Matatini or Taranaki. So my name is Dawn Marsh. I'm a learning advisor based at Te Pūkenga in Taranaki in New Plymouth. Me karakia tātou. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. Kia hi aki ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Josta, do you want me to carry on?
I think I was actually on mute. I was actually introducing you. Aroha mai. Yeah. So, and I was saying that this was a very important session because of all the changes that are proposed in the future with every change of government. So, it's really an honor to actually have this as a special interest group session. And I said, I gave the space to you, Dawn, but I think, I was on mute and I wasn't even sharing my video. Aroha mai.
Technology, we love it, don't we? Okay, so kia ora. Let me just start with a little bit of background for those who aren't up to speed. So in July of this year, the government announced that the Tertiary Education Commission and Ministry of Education were consulting on proposed restructuring in the vocational education and training scheme, specifically disestablishing Te Pūkenga and replacing it with a new structure. So there were three parts of that structure. The first was to disestablish Te Pūkenga, stand up some independent Polytechnics and other entities, and then to federate others under the Open Polytechnic, or anchored to the Open Polytechnic was the words that they use. The second part of the proposal was to replace workforce development councils, and the third was changes to funding, specifically the redistribution of equity-based funding. So in the current structure under Te Pūkenga, there are the former Institutes of Technology and Polytech, so there were 16 went in, and also the ex-ITOs and industry training organisations. And obviously there are other tertiary institutions, private training establishments, wānanga and universities who sit outside of Te Pūkenga. However, I think that the things happening in the vocational education and training sector do signal the government's kind of plans for tertiary education more broadly, particularly in terms of funding and equity funding. So the proposed new structure was very light on detail, but we got this little diagram here. So what the government said it was proposing to do was re-establish the Institutes of Technology and Polytechnics that could, quote, show a robust pathway to financial and educational sustainability. So they would sit outside of this federation. And then the other mainly smaller Polytechnics would be within this federation, anchored to the Open Polytech and receiving some services and curricula and resources from the Open Polytech, although exactly what and how that would work was not really explained. So there would be some form of collective governance over the top. The Open Polytech there is a lead institution and probably largely the other polytechnics using resources or tapping into courses from the Open Polytech in some way. And then there was this lovely idea of some would have not very much autonomy because they are very small and not very financially viable, and others might be only and temporarily on a pathway to standing alone. So that was what we were asked to consult on, and ATLAANZ collectively made a submission on that. The bulk of our submission was that, you know, what on earth are we supposed to be giving feedback on when there's really no detail there? So it was a lot of questions about what might this look like, or how might this work, but also concerns about that redistribution of equity funding. So I was involved in that group, and I can see some of the other people involved in that group are here, Georgie, Rowan, Shelley, Anthea, Claire, but there were others who contributed to that in many ways. So we drafted a submission, and that was sent on the 11th of September. Submissions closed on the 12th. We got a nice little email in receipt of our submission. And since then, there has been nothing. I went on the Beehive website, had a look for any media releases or statements from Penny Simmonds. Since then, nothing. We were expecting this to go to Cabinet before Christmas. That seems extremely unlikely. So we're all in this state of limbo and uncertainty. In the meantime, this particular statement from the consultation document really bothered me. So it said, a federation of public providers has not been tested in New Zealand, but there are several long-standing examples from other jurisdictions, including the United States and the United Kingdom. Earlier work with the ITP sector in 2018 found a federation model was feasible. So that statement was in that consultation document, and there were no references. So I'm sure as learning advisors and academics, you're like, you can't make a statement like that and not back it up. So I did an official information request to Penny Simmonds' office and to the TEC and Ministry of Education for the background information or documents that supported that statement. And I was sent 4 documents, one of which was a journal article which is released. The 4th one also has now been released, and some documents that were made available by the Parliamentary Library and to Penny herself. So these are those resources there. They're in my reference list. I'm very happy to forward that to people as well. What you might notice from that is all of those resources have kind of the same group of scholars and researchers on them. So it's hardly a very comprehensive survey of information. And the Parliamentary Library resources was quite brief. It was a couple of paragraphs about various models around the world that had been, well, actually only in the UK and US. So maybe a couple of paragraphs about each. And then an article from Forbes magazine. And I just have this horrible feeling that our entire vocational educational training sector policy is based on an article from Forbes magazine about one particular model of federated tertiary providers. So these are the researchers who have been advising the Minister. So this is Sharon Brownlee. She is currently at Swinburne but has connections to Wintec. Kath Cooney, who some of you from Toi Ohomai will probably know. Patrick Broman, who was at the Ministry of Education and is now at Swinburne. This is Leon DeWitt-Foree, who was at Toi Ohomai, and Leith Comer, who was at Te Pūkenga. So these researchers have produced a number of studies that are quite interesting. They are based on an analysis of Wintec, Toi Ohomai, and Hawke's Bay. So they were comparing the centralised model that was happening at Wintec, where it was pulling back from its smaller outlets, there used to be one in Te Kuiti, for example, back to the central campus, with Toi Ohomai, which was doing a lot more in the regions and with smaller centres in rural communities to enable access. And they compared the enrolment and completion data to statistics held by Statistics New Zealand from the census and to the Ministry of Education's integrated data infrastructure database. And what they argued was that centralisation is a terrible idea. Decentralisation works much better. So we like what Toi Ohomai is doing. We like this outreach into rural areas. And without that, you create what they called education deserts that compound the socioeconomic inequities for rural and Māori communities, which is really interesting because that does not seem to reflect government policy. So they were obviously in favour of the models being adopted by Toi Ohomai, and yet we heard from Ruth yesterday that those very models are being pulled apart and not valued. So they argued for a return to regional distinctiveness and decision-making, more autonomy within the regions. There was also a statement there which I thought was very interesting, and particularly in light of our keynote speaker this morning, Peter Hudson's statement. So they said there was a lack of evidence linking having Māori appointed to co-management positions to improved Māori learning outcomes and Māori access to learning. I feel that was quite a specific dig at the Te Pūkenga structure, which has been very bicultural in its approach, and had appointed a number of Māori staff to key leadership positions. And that third, it was unpublished at the time, it's published now, article by Brownlee and colleagues was suggesting that actually if we want to improve Māori achievement, maybe Māori don't need to be leading that, which just seems to fly in the sense of everything we believe about partnership and about being allies and about listening to Māori voice. So that was a particular concern to me. So the Parliamentary Library resource had 4 models, Federation models, that it compared it to. So one was the California Community Colleges model, which is in 73 districts across 8 economic regions, so quite large, and 116 colleges. The other was the University of London Federation, which, now that's quite different because they're all in London, right? So they can share some services in London and students can reasonably get on the tube and go across to another campus to access some service provision because they're all in the same city. There was the 5 college consortium model in Massachusetts, which is operated as a not-for-profit with a shared governance structure. And then there was the low-cost model for independent colleges consortium, which was the subject of that Forbes magazine article. So that was a number of private colleges. They were mainly liberal arts colleges, in fact, all liberal arts colleges, I think, in the United States. And they went into a consortium together. So there was a lot more detail about this particular one that suggests it might be the basis of what the government had in mind. So this particular consortia started with 3 programs and has expanded now to more than 20 programs. The individual colleges choose which programs they wish to offer, and they pay per student and per course that they take out of the consortia. So I could see something like that operating with the Open Polytech. So perhaps we at WIT might offer an elective that we don't have available here, or a major that we don't have available here. We might want to tap into Open Polytech courses or resources, and we might pay them a fee if one of our students is enrolled in that course. The programs are still have to be approved by the institution that then offers them. So that would be WIT would have to approve that course as part of its degree program, for example. So this model was very much about cost cutting. Its goal was to reduce cost by 30% over 10 years, and that sounds an awful lot like our current government. And they also meet regularly to discuss and share cost cutting initiatives. So to share kind of best practice in that direction. So that was potentially what we might be looking at as a federation. However, in the meantime, as those of us who work in the sector will be aware, PricewaterhouseCoopers has been coming through line by line through our books and hacking and slashing. So a lot of us are going through major restructure processes, but even with those restructure processes, it has been reported that almost none of the former institutes of technology and Polytech would be financially viable. So at this stage, it looks like the only 2 that are the Open Polytech and ARA. So what might this federation look like? It might look like ARA being independent and everyone else in a federation. So that seems extremely unlikely. So I suspect that the reason that we have had radio silence from the minister, that this has not yet gone to cabinet, that we still don't have a detailed plan, is probably that the federation is a dead duck. It's not going to work because who can be independent other than ARA? So I don't really have anything else to tell you because I don't even think the government knows what happens next. But I just wanted to throw the floor open at this point for people to share what's happening perhaps in their own institutions, or perhaps share any rumours or insights you might have, because we all kind of feel like we're on our own little islands and wondering what happens next. So I'll throw the floor open now. And I'll have a look at the chat.
Hi, Dawn. Jerry Hoffman here from SIT.
Kia ora, Jerry.
Kia ora.
You're in Penny's patch.
Yeah. So so I've worked on the penny for 25 years. So anyway, I agree with you what you had just said. The other thing being that there was a fourth option that nobody was talking about that I heard. Some of this coming from the TEU and people who have who might have a little better overview of what's actually happening and stuff like that. And so I was talking to some people yesterday at a meeting or Wednesday, and again, that fourth option, what you were sort of saying, was one that nobody knows about, and actually and so that's sort of what everybody's sort of waiting to see. You did mention that it didn't seem like anything was going to happen before Christmas. Again, what I was told yesterday was that on Monday, Penny was supposed to have the plan into what was going to happen, and now that's actually been put off to the 9th. So
Okay.
and then cabinet was going to look at it after the 9th. They're like, she's been given enough. And again, this is just hearsay what I'm hearing from the upper people in the union. So have you heard anything about that? Nothing's going to happen before Christmas?
Haven't heard anything really.
Okay, but
Yeah.
again, the latest I had is that it's been put off a week. It's supposed to be the 2nd of December, and now it's looks like it's
She's
probably
got an
gonna be-
extension.
It has till the 9th. And so
Well,
whether they can decide anything before
okay.
then, again, is just up in the air.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting to know. So we're undergoing a major restructure at the moment, which is affecting a lot of our academic staff, but it's also affecting our learning advisor team. So our team's been reduced from 4.5 equivalent full-time staff to 3.5 equivalent full-time staff. We put in an offer to all reduce our hours. They put in a counter offer, which I rejected. So I'll be leaving WIT at the end of next week, and I'm moving to Victoria. So this is kind of my swan song for the VET sector. What's happening in other people's places?
Sorry, Dawn, what was the reduction in your FTE for what?
4.5 to 3.5. So one person.
Very interesting. I think ours have yet to come at Toiomai. There's obviously the regional viability project going on behind the scenes with Te Pūkenga, and Te Whare has a great source sort of outlining those steps. There's a few phases that are yet to come from our understanding, but we haven't had any support services touched yet. But we've just Toiomai's just recently, as of yesterday, the submissions for our first phase of proposed changes finished, and yeah, that had a huge impact on regional delivery. I'll try not to put on my union hat here because I also serve as co-branch president for our branch here, but there is yeah, a lot of concerns around, especially in light of this information, using non-academic sources to inform the model of a federated model. And obviously, from the union's perspective, there was, a real push to the minister to reconsider the advice given by the Ministry of Education as a starting point, because the federated model did not actually reflect any of the advice given. And from what I've seen from a lot of submissions to the redesign of VET, a lot of industry stakeholders, as well as unions, as well as councils and whatnot, especially NZCTU, have all put forward that they essentially, the message is to reconsider the options and keep it regional, because this new model does not keep it regional at all. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out in terms of the return from the government. They've only got a day now to
Mm.
based on their time frame. So I don't know if the time frame's changed. I haven't heard anything from National Office, but there is a rumour floating around that because Penny Simmonds sits outside of Cabinet, a lot of ministers in there aren't actually aware of what's happening at a regional level with all these job changes. Obviously, they're aware of cost-cutting measures taking place, but not to the extent that it's going to impact regional delivery, which of course undermines what the government is wanting in some way in terms of their vision. So there's a bit of a ruckus there, and we've had several meetings with our local MP Todd McClay, who's actually meeting with the minister next week. So we're actually putting a quick brief for him together that he can then take to the meeting, because he's quite shocked about the programs that are being cut are really essential to the region, and I'm sure that's the same that's happening across the country, and it's potentially going to, if we do move into a federated model with, that's supposed to be regionally responsive, it's going to undo any opportunity of that happening. And good luck trying to get staff who have been let go back to help deliver that vision for the government. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just go back to that, original statement that was in the submission document, which suggested, that the model was feasible. There's nothing in those documents about feasibility. These were not feasibility studies. So one was a literature review that informed the research, and then the other couple were those researchers who had studied Wintek Toihohomai EIT and come down firmly in favour of Toihohomai EIT's approach to tertiary delivery. So it's really hard to see how the model follows from the advice, or how the Federation is considered at all feasible.
Huge conflict of interest having Leon and Kathy on that advisory panel too, I think, because they're both, had their toes in the water here and have obviously on the board level and on a management level. So that's quite a big thing to point out too, I think, because the fact that they've been having a say, and it's sort of cherry picking, I guess, but it's not evidence based, isn't it? This is what's working for us. It could work for everyone else.
It really does not appear to be evidence based.
No.
No.
But when does any national government or any coalition government formed by national tend to be evidence based anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just very quickly share the document that I got under the Official Information Act, and you can see how brief it is. Where is my share screen? There it is. Not that one. That one. So I don't know if you can see that, but this is the document that was released under the Official Information Act. So one of the documents was excluded, which was the published article. So this was clearly their PowerPoint or something documents that they provided. These are their research articles, the team, that's where I got that image from. And then this is just the Parliamentary Library information, a little paragraph about each of the models. And then this is where the Forbes article starts, and that Forbes article is basically reprinted in full. That is the extent of the advice. So this is the unpublished journal article, which is now published, Tale of Three Regions. You can Google it and find it, but I'm happy to send it out to people. And this was the one that made that comment about Māori. Yeah, here. There's a lack of evidence here to link of having Māori appointed to co-management positions would lead to Māori learning outcomes and Māori access to learning. So there's really not a lot to that official information advice that I received, but I'm very happy to distribute that to anyone who'd like it.
That would be really good, Dawn, because in the comments there was, how can we find the published submission, because it couldn't be found, and also to share article links for the 5 researchers.
Yeah.
And yes, do please share any articles or information.
Yeah. So so I was kind of both surprised and not surprised, I guess, by the substance of that response. Yeah. Is there anyone else that would like to share something or comment?
Yeah, I share with Dawn quite a lot because we work next door to each other, but the main thing that concerns me is the time factor, in the sense that no matter which the government is, as in the Pūkenga iteration that the Labour government introduced, or even the Federation model which we're discussing here, as Dawn alluded to earlier, by the time Penny reports to Cabinet or whatever that looks like, and then the time frame of implementation of what she's proposing 1-2 years or whatever down the track. I mean, we all know how long Te Pūkenga took or didn't take. So I guess what I'm saying is it's, from presentation stage to implementation stage, who knows how long that will take or what it looks like. And yeah, and then we're at the next election stage, and yeah, it's just a never-ending cycle of uncertainty, really.
Yeah, I agree. And it is, I think, the uncertainty that's really taking a toll on the well-being of staff. Just the impossibility of trying to plan your life or make major life decisions. I mean, who among us would be, buying a house, not knowing if you have a job in a few years. Yeah. One of the things that was interesting was that as part of our discussions, we did have a couple of people from Open Poly as part of that, and it seemed that they really had no more information than any of the rest of us about how Open Poly might be impacted by that. And obviously from an Open Poly perspective, they might be delivering more services to the regions, or they might lose their service delivery to the regions because those might be outsourced to our individual campuses. And there was really a lack of clarity around that data.
Dawn, I just wanted to pick up from something that we were talking, well, Ruth was talking about yesterday
Yes.
in her presentation, and that was around the availability or the ability of, and I guess this applies particularly the ITP sector, but actually it could be extended to university students as well, is the concept that under the Te Pūkenga model, no matter where somebody lived and no matter which institution they were studying through, they would be able to access sort of student support services, including learning advisors, library services, at whichever was the nearest tertiary institution. In a previous time where we didn't have quite so much competition, at UCOL, we particularly had sort of terms of agreement, or I can't even think of the word now, with other institutions, MOUs, that's it, with other institutions, like, for example, students studying midwifery through Open Poly, but were through Otago Poly, but were based in Wanganui or our wider area, would be able to access support services locally, which was something that a lot of our students valued. And we had MOUs with a bunch of institutions quite a number of years ago. But one aspect that we were all quite excited about, and potential students were quite excited about, was that could have re-emerged. Be interesting to know the appetite going forward, no matter which model we kind of operate under, whether we could get that back, because I think that would be to enormous value to our konga, particularly given the preference for face-to-face support where possible.
Yeah, and I think as Ruth said yesterday, that was one of our hopes under Te Pūkenga, was that for example, Open Poly students or students studying online from other polytechnics might make greater use of our campuses and our services and feel more supported, because as we know, the retention and completion of students studying online is lower. So always has been, and it's often because of that lack of support or perceived lack of support or technological challenges or just life challenges that those students make, which was the focus of Ruth's presentation.
I think another thing that came out in Ruth's presentation was just around, we've been underfunded for so long, and I think all the attention on organizational structure and a model is not actually addressing the real issue of the funding model.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the problem has always been the funding model. The problem is still the funding model, and over-dependence on international students to prop up inadequate domestic funding, which we learned that lesson hard through COVID. So, yeah. Is there anyone else that has a contribution, or shall we wind up here? I'm mindful that I'm keeping you from your lunch.
Actually, I'd like to just say, Dawn, I'm sure this is on behalf of everybody, our appreciation that the work you have done on this submission in organising it and putting it together. It would have taken so much time and effort. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I'll maintain an interest even though I will be not in the sector anymore. So I've taken up formally Deb's position as assistant manager at Te Pūkenga, Victoria University. So I will be starting there on the 9th of December. So as you can imagine, my life is chaos. And on that happy note, I'll close us with karakia. Unahia I te urutapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takatū. Koia rā I rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia, hau, pai marere. Thank you, everyone.
Kia ora, Dawn. Thank you also for your karakia. So this session, I think you've done amazing work. I look forward to seeing you. I'm not at FIC, but that you're going there. So and I know it's a nice team you're going into. So thank you. And what we can say is watch this space. Hopefully there is more clarity. And what Ashton also said, do talk also for those of you who are members of the TU, do talk to your union. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Kia
What a
ora.
great note to end on. Kia ora. Thank you, everyone.